joined by ESPN national college football writer Bruce Feldman after the first day of USC spring football practice. And we're only 6 months away from the first game, so guys, let's jump to some conclusions here. Pedro, what jumped out at you just in terms of seeing the guys back on the field today that was impressive? Yeah.
Well, you have to get the idea that they're severely limited by how many guys are hurt. I mean, Lane Kiffin's brought it up as many times as possible in the last 2 days that they have 19 or 20 guys who are not able to compete right now in contact practice. So it's obviously troubling the team. I mean, the offensive line, there's 6 guys for 5 positions that you have to have, so it's a lot of rotating in there, a lot of mixing and matching, and they have to do some 7-on-7 when they like to do 11-on-11. There's a lot of problems, and they're just trying to figure it all out at this point. So it's going to be pretty problematic, I'd imagine.
Bruce, put it in context. I mean, you see a lot of these camps around the country. What's different here than maybe elsewhere?
Well, I think it's what Pedro just said, the bodies. They just don't have a lot of big people right now. You see some walk-ons. I mean, there's still spots where you look at the receivers and you see a Robert Woods, and he's as good as there is in the country. But then you look at the offensive linemen, and there are guys, you know, Lane Kiffin said it at the end of practice. He said, you know, we're 19 short, and that's at the start. They're going to probably lose some guys over the course of these 15 practices, and that's going to hurt the depth even more. But I think that they're used to it. I talked to James Craig, the offensive line coach. You know, basically they have a couple of walk-ons in the mix, and he said it's the kind of thing where we had last year. We had to go through it, and now they're managing a little better. You saw them, you know, when they were in team period, they mixed in 7-on-7 because they don't have a second team really group of offensive linemen to get reps at this point. They will when, you know, this big recruiting class shows up, but at this point they're juggling.
Yeah, you mentioned they could lose more guys to injury as the spring goes along. I think they may have lost one today. Starting tailback Mark Tyler pulled up, you know, with what appeared to be a left hamstring injury. So yeah, this could be, you know, in a number of positions, this could be a big issue. You mentioned the offensive line, Bruce. A lot of people are talking about that, just the numbers. How will they accommodate for the fact that they have so many injuries, and is it going to be a big issue going into fall camp? Pedro, what do you think?
I mean, you have to expect that it's going to be. I mean, in fall they'll get 4 guys and probably 2 or 3 really capable guys who could end up starting. Andre Walker, the big lineman from Glenville, Ohio, could easily end up starting at right tackle, maybe right guard. So those guys, the offensive linemen they're bringing in, they're going to have to play big roles, probably bigger than you'd like a freshman, an 18-year-old freshman to play. But that's really the only way they're going to have any sort of depth. The only other option is finding a diamond in the rough walk-on. I mean, they had one, Abe Markowitz, go from walk-on to scholarship player, but he's hurt, he's out for the spring. So there's really just not that many options. Basically what you have to do is just hope that your freshmen come in ready to play and ready to do everything you need them to do.
Yeah, and as lack of depth as it is an issue on the offensive line, there's less bodies on the defensive line at this point. And, you know, I think it's a spring. I think people need to keep in perspective that you are going to see, you know, an influx of the numbers are going to go up dramatically when you get a lot of defensive linemen, a lot of offensive linemen, and highly regarded ones that were recruited that'll come in. But the issue, as Pedro just said, is, you know, these are guys that I think they're hoping they don't have to play, that they can redshirt, you know, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 offensive linemen and maybe 1 or 2 defensive linemen. But the bulk of them, I think they'd like to see that they're really hoping to stock up and brace for when the sanctions really get them. And I think this is what's happened here is really a reflection of them being so short on numbers going into the sanctions, because unlike a lot of places, they hadn't had 30-person recruiting classes in the past. When Pete Carroll was here, there was a lot of recruiting classes that were 18, 19, 20, and I think that those lack of numbers, that's the issue that they're really sorting out right now.
Okay, let's look at one positive. Matt Barkley coming back after 2 seasons as starter. It's very rare you have a junior with that kind of experience. Pedro, you have a class with him. I mean, what do you expect to see from this guy? And I'd be curious, Bruce, if you could put it in kind of national context, how good is this guy? Where does he rank?
I mean, he could easily be, I'm sure he's going to say, he could easily be a top 10 pick in the 2012 NFL draft. There's no reason why he couldn't. If he improves in a similar way to what he did from his freshman year to his sophomore year, this year from his sophomore to his junior year, you by all means expect him to be, you know, up there in the top quarterbacks nationally. I mean, he makes all the mental improvements you expect to see from a top-notch quarterback. He has all the athletic things you need. So there's no reason why you wouldn't expect him to do that.
Yeah, I think he's going to put up big numbers. I mean, like I said before, I think Robert Woods is fantastic. I think Kyle Prater, if he, you know, when he gets healthy, if he can be half as good as his, you know, hype came in, it's a big deal. You have Farmers coming in as probably the best receiver recruit in the country. I mean, there are guys also behind them who have played some. So I think that's good. I think the issue with Barkley moving forward is he cut down on the mistakes last year. He's got to do it even more so. I think consistency is another issue. You watch him one week and you think this guy might be, one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the country in terms of that. You look another week and there's some stuff you see, well, it just wasn't as sharp. You look at the Oregon game, big games where, they needed him to be great, and that's asking a lot for a second-year sophomore. And there were times where he was good, and there were times where he was not so good. There were moments where he was great. I think in terms of a national context, to me, everything is going to start with Andrew Luck, the quarterback at Stanford. By far the best quarterback prospect out there. He's a bigger guy than Barkley is. He's a much more athletic. You're talking about a guy who's going to probably run sub 4.5, 4.6, 4.65, somewhere like that. Has everything the NFL wants. Probably would have been the first pick overall if he'd come out. After that, I think you see guys who are dual threat guys. But I think that the Pac-10 again now has a lot of really good quarterbacks. I think that you'll see. I think Oregon has a big time guy in Darren Thomas. Maybe not the pro prospect, but a different style guy. And I think that Nick Foles at Arizona is a very good player. So I think there's guys in the Pac-10, whereas in the SEC you look, Aaron Murray's probably the best guy they have. The Big East, there's not as much. The Big 12, there's Landry Jones and Oklahoma's guy. But I think after Andrew Luck, I think Matt Barkley could be one of the next 3 guys in that group. It's just a matter of is he going to be ready if he has a big year to come out. I think USC has to hope that he has a big year and decides, I want to stay. I want to be his 4-year starter and see where this goes, because I think they really could use him. To keep the leadership and the momentum, because really you look at him, he was the guy they brought out the day the sanctions hit. It was he and Lane Kiffin. I mean, to think of a kid who had really only been a 1-year starter at that point, he was very composed, he was very impressive. I think those kinds of the face of USC football going forward, I think that's something that USC really needs.
Well, there's no reason to think that he might not emulate Andrew Luck and shock everybody and come back for his senior year. One thing I would point out with Barkley is I think there's going to be some peripheral issues that'll have a huge impact on his season. As you mentioned, they have excellent skill position players. They're going to spread the field a little bit more, is what they're talking about now. The question is, can they protect him, though? If they can't protect him, then he's not going to have time to do a lot of the stuff they're going to try and do. And that could be sort of the issue to look at, especially early in the season.
And will his receivers, stay healthy too? I mean, even right now, there's 4 scholarship guys in spring practice at receiver. It's not that many. I mean, you had Butler transfer, you have Pedro out probably for at least half. I mean, if those guys, obviously we expect Pedro to be healthy for fall, but if he isn't for some reason, it's not that crazy.
And who knows what you're going to get with Markeith Ambles?
Yeah.
I mean, for all his rankings coming out, you wonder about the maturity, if he's going to be a guy where he's going to develop and be a guy they can count on. The other thing that I'm curious, when you guys see this on a daily basis, is USC has really been its traditional offense for a long time. It's weird not seeing Stanley Havili out here, because I feel like he's been here for 10 years.
I think he was, but
but just a fullback that they could do a lot of stuff with, and USC, unlike a lot of other places, I mean, they really had always incorporated that. I'm not sure going forward they have the numbers to do that. Maybe they're going to put a lot on a freshman to do that, but I think they may have to, as Lane said, try to do a few different things and be a little more of a spread team, because that suits their personnel better.
okay, good stuff, day 1.